Magistrate Gregory Matthysse thought he'd seen it all during his 25 years on TV. The 64-year-old judge is known for being strict yet compassionate and wise, but he was about to face a challenge that would catch him completely off guard. When Representative Jasmine Crockett walked into his courtroom, everything we thought we knew about these two strong personalities changed in an instant. It all started with a laugh. Matthysse actually chuckled when he heard the case being presented. But what Jasmine Crockett said next not only silenced his laughter but also flipped the entire courtroom upside down, leaving even the seasoned magistrate at a loss for words. Before we dive into this incredible story, go ahead and hit that like button if you want to see what happens when political power meets judicial integrity. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on these jaw-dropping moments. This wasn't just another day at Magistrate Matthysse court. This was when a rising political star faced off against a television legend, and the results left everyone shocked. Get ready for a showdown nobody saw coming. To understand why this encounter was so explosive, you need to know exactly who these two giants are and why their meeting was destined to happen. Magistrate Gregory Matthysse has been a household name for more than 20 years. The former street kid from Detroit turned magistrate has built his reputation as the straightforward voice of reason. His show, Magistrate Matthysse, has been on air since 1999, making him one of the longest-serving TV judges out there. At 64, Matthysse has presided over thousands of cases, dealt with all kinds of personalities, and has a solid reputation for keeping his cool. He's known for his quick wit, his ability to spot a liar, and that trademark laugh of his that can either comfort or signal a stern reality check is on the way. Growing up in Detroit's Herman Gardens housing project, Matthysse was involved with gangs as a kid, but he turned his life around to become a magistrate, author, and media personality. He takes pride in his authentic roots and his ability to connect with everyday people. So, when he laughs in court, it usually means someone's about to get a serious lesson in life. Representative Jasmine Crockett represents a whole new kind of influence. At 43, she's quickly becoming a notable figure in the Democratic Party, serving Texas's 30th congressional district. A lawyer who transitioned into politics, she's made a name for herself with her powerful speeches and her knack for standing her ground, no matter who she's up against. Growing up in St. Louis, she worked her way through law school and built a practice focused on defending those who can't defend themselves. Known for her sharp rhetoric and legal skills, she has a talent for turning any attack back on her opponents. When she speaks, people listen, and when challenged, she doesn't just respond, she wins. This wasn't meant to be a fair fight. Magistrate Matthysse, with his decades of experience dealing with tough personalities on his home turf, had all the advantages. But what no one saw coming was that Crockett didn't intend to play by his rules. She was there to change them entirely. The conflict that brought them together seemed pretty straightforward at first, a civil disagreement over a troubled community development project. However, underneath that simple surface was a deeper struggle for power, respect, and the true right to represent the people. Matthysse thought he was facing just another politician who would crumble in front of his well-known presence. Crockett saw this as her chance to show that things were about to shift. The morning began like any typical day in Magistrate Mathysse' Detroit courtroom. The familiar theme music played, the crowd settled in, and Matthysse walked in with his usual confidence. He greeted everyone with a cheerful smile, made a few lighthearted jokes to warm things up, and got ready for what he thought would be just another standard case. "Today, we're discussing a dispute over community development," he said, looking at his notes. "The plaintiff is Representative Jasmine Crockett, here on behalf of the residents of the Elmwood community in Dallas, Texas." That's when the first surprise hit. As Jasmine Crockett walked into the courtroom, she didn't fit the mold of a typical litigant. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, she radiated the confidence of a leader and brought along a small team carrying boxes of evidence. Matthysse raised an eyebrow. Well, look who we have, a genuine congresswoman in the house today," he quipped, getting a few laughs from the crowd. "I hope you're ready for real justice, not the political show you're used to in Washington." Crockett smiled but didn't take the bait. Instead, she organized her materials and waited for him to continue. The defendant was a prominent development company that had promised to build affordable housing in a Dallas neighborhood, but instead, they took the money and ended up constructing luxury condos that the original residents couldn't afford. The lawyer for the company, looking nervous in his expensive suit, seemed eager to escape the situation. Magistrate Matthysse reviewed the case details and began his usual approach. "Representative Crockett, I see you're here for your constituents, which is admirable, but this is my courtroom, not Congress. We deal in facts here, not political talk. Can you handle that?" The audience chuckled, anticipating that Crockett might show some discomfort. But she stood up calmly and replied, "Your Honor, I've been dealing with facts my entire career. both as a lawyer and an elected official. I'm ready whenever you are. There was something about her tone that made Magistrate Matthysse take a closer look. This wasn't going to be as simple as he thought. All right then, Matthysse said, leaning back in his seat. Explain to me why you think this company owes your people anything. They signed a contract, right? Contracts are binding, even in Texas. Crockett opened her first box of evidence. Your Honor, they did sign a contract, and according to that agreement, they committed to building 200 units of affordable housing with rents capped at $800 a month. Instead, they went ahead and built luxury condos starting at $2,500 a month. But they did build housing, Matthysse interrupted. That's what the contract required, build housing. Maybe your people should have been clearer about what they wanted. This is when the discussion got interesting. Matthysse was using his standard tactic, trying to test the plaintiff's grasp of their case. But he also seemed to think that this congresswoman was just after some publicity. Crockett held her ground. Your Honor, the contract clearly defined affordable housing according to HUD guidelines for the area. Those guidelines are federal law. The defendants were well aware of what they were agreeing to. Federal law, Matthysse chuckled, his signature laugh suggesting he was getting ready to enlighten someone. Well, Representative, you might draft federal laws, but in my courtroom, we stick to common sense. And common sense tells me that if these folks didn't read their contract carefully, that's on them. The audience laughed again, some nodding along, aligning with Matthysse supporters, people who valued personal responsibility and had little patience for what they saw as government interference. But Crockett was prepared. She pulled out a hefty folder and set it down on the podium. Your Honor, I appreciate your emphasis on common sense. Let me show you what it looks like when backed by law. She opened the folder and began displaying enlarged photos on an easel her team had set up. The images portrayed the original community, working families, elderly residents, and kids playing in modest but well-kept yards. These are the people of the Elmwood community, Crockett said. This is Mrs. Sarah Johnson, 67, who lived here for 30 years, juggling 2 jobs to provide for her home and raise her grandchildren after her daughter's death. When the developers came, they promised her she'd still have a place in the new development. Magistrate Matthysse was still a bit skeptical, but he was starting to really pay attention to the details. Crockett moved on to the next photo, which showed the same area after development, shiny luxury condos with security gates and fancy cars parked in the driveways. This is what they built instead. Mrs. Johnson is now living in a shelter because she can't afford $2,500 a month. Matthysse responded, that's unfortunate. But business is business. If there were loopholes in the contract, there weren't any loopholes, Crockett interrupted firmly. There was fraud. The word fraud hung in the air, a heavy accusation that needed solid evidence. Matthysse straightened up. That's a serious accusation, Representative, he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. You'd better be ready to back it up. I am, Crockett replied confidently. She pulled out another set of documents. These are internal emails from the development company that we got through legal discovery. In these emails, the executives joke about tricking the locals and admit they never planned to build affordable housing. Magistrate Matthysse wasn't laughing anymore. He took the documents and read through them carefully, his expression changing from skepticism to surprise, then to real anger. Mr. Patterson, he directed at the company's lawyer, did your clients really say that these people are too naive to understand affordable housing? The lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Honor, that email was taken out of context. Taken out of context? Matthisse's voice rose. The context seems pretty clear to me. Your clients accepted community development funds, promised affordable housing, and then built condos that these people could never afford, and laughed about it. But Crockett wasn't finished. Noticing that Matthysse was really understanding the gravity of the case, she pushed on. Your Honor, this isn't just about one community in Dallas. It's a nationwide issue where developers target low-income areas, promise progress, and then push out the very people they claimed they would help. Matthysse looked at her sharply. Are you trying to make my tribunal a platform for your political agenda, Representative? This was a crucial moment. Matthysse was directly challenging Crockett, suggesting she was just another politician using his tribunal for her own goals. The audience leaned in, expecting her to back down or get defensive. Instead, she smiled. No, Your Honor, she said calmly. I'm trying to turn your tribunal into a place where real justice happens. The room went silent. This wasn't just a comeback, it was a bold challenge to Matthysse' authority and reputation, implying his tribunal wasn't already a space for justice. Matthysse stared at her for a long moment, clearly processing what was happening. Could this young congresswoman really be confronting him in his own arena? Excuse me, he said, his voice low and controlled. Crockett held her ground. Your Honor, you've built your reputation on standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. You shared your background, growing up in the projects and knowing what it's like to have nothing. Yet, when I bring forward proof of a company taking advantage of people like those you grew up with, your first reaction is to blame the victims. You could feel the tension in the air. Mathis had dealt with tough situations before, but this was different. This was someone not just challenging his ruling but questioning his entire approach. "Representative," he said slowly, "you're walking a tightrope here." "No, Your Honor," Crockett shot back. "I'm standing right where I should be, on the side of justice." What happened next was unheard of. Magistrate Matthysse, who had presided over his court for more than 20 years, was about to face off against a legal mind that was as sharp as his own, maybe even sharper. Leaning in, he kept his confidence but looked a bit rattled as he said, "Representative, you seem to believe you can lecture me about justice in my own courtroom. Let me remind you where you are." "I know exactly where I am," Crockett replied without missing a beat. "I'm in a tribunal where a magistrate is about to decide whether a company that defrauded vulnerable people will be held accountable. The real question is, do you?" Gasps filled the room. No one had ever spoken to Magistrate Matthysse like that. But Crockett was just getting started. She walked up to the bench with another box of evidence. "Your Honor, you wanted facts. Let me show you something that will shock you." She hooked up a laptop to the tribunal's display system, pulling up bank records that showed the defendants had received $12 million in federal funds meant for affordable housing. "They took taxpayer money, Your Honor, and instead of building affordable homes, they splurged it on luxury materials for condos that people with low incomes could never afford. They didn't just break a contract, they stole from the federal government." Matthysse leaned in, his initial skepticism turning into real curiosity. "Plus," Crockett continued, "when residents complained, the company brought in a law firm to intimidate them into silence. Elderly residents got threats of lawsuits they couldn't afford. Single mothers were told they'd lose their kids if they didn't stop." She pulled out recorded phone calls. "These are actual recordings of those threats, Your Honor. Want to hear them?" Matthysse nodded, looking grim, and Crockett played a recording of a company rep threatening an elderly woman if she didn't stop questioning the development. The room went eerily quiet as that harsh voice echoed. Matthysse even looked visibly upset. "Your Honor," Crockett said with passion, "you talk about common sense? Common sense says that when powerful entities take from the powerless, someone has to speak up. That's why I'm here." Then, out of the blue, she turned to Matthysse directly. "Judge Matthysse, I've watched your show for years. I've seen you back single mothers, hold negligent fathers accountable, and give young people second chances because you remember getting one yourself." Matthysse listened intently, his defensive posture softening a bit. "But at some point," Crockett pressed on, "you started ignoring the fact that the real offenders aren't the petty scammers on your show. They're the ones with expensive lawyers and corporate offices stealing millions from whole communities." She gestured toward the defense table, where the company's lawyer was looking more and more uncomfortable. "This company didn't just hurt Mrs. Johnson and her neighbors. They harmed everyone who believes that hard work and following the rules deserve fair treatment. They harmed every community that trusts developers' promises. And they harmed every magistrate who believes in justice." Matthysse put down his papers and looked at Crockett with a new level of respect. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Your Honor, back when I walked in, you laughed because you thought I was just another politician looking for the spotlight. But I'm actually here as a lawyer for those who can't fight for themselves, just like you did before you became famous." The room was quiet, with only Crockett's voice breaking the silence. "What's the real difference between politics and justice? Politics is all about making empty promises to make people feel good. Justice, on the other hand, is about making sure powerful people keep their promises." She held up one last document, a promissory note signed by the defendants, pledging that displaced residents would receive comparable housing or compensation. "They signed this, Your Honor. They made a promise." Matthysse studied the paper closely, his expression changing from skepticism to surprise, and then to admiration for Crockett's diligence. "How many families were displaced?" he asked. 67 families, Crockett answered right away. 67 families who trusted these people. "And how many got the compensation or housing they were promised?" "None, Your Honor. Not a single one." Matthysse looked over at the defense lawyer. "Mr. Patterson, I trust you have a good explanation." The lawyer fidgeted a bit. "Your Honor, the company has been dealing with financial troubles." "Financial troubles?" Matthisse's voice got louder. "They took $12 million in federal funds and built luxury condos, yet they're claiming financial troubles?" "Well, Your Honor, the market conditions changed," Patterson stammered. "Market conditions," Matthysse echoed, his frustration rising. "Mr. Patterson, do you really think I'm that naive?" That's when Crockett stepped in with a powerful point. "Your Honor," she said, maintaining her composure, "there's something else about those market conditions." She pulled up a real estate website on her phone. "The company is listing these condos at $3,200 a month, and they're fully rented out with a waiting list. They're not struggling, they're doing well. They just won't keep their promises to the poor." Matthysse looked at the screen, then back at Crockett, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Representative," he said slowly, "you didn't just present a case. You brought a mission." "Yes, Your Honor," Crockett responded, standing a bit taller. And that mission is to show that justice isn't about politics, fame, or popularity. It's about ensuring powerful people uphold their promises to those without power. And when they fall short, someone needs to make them accountable. Mathis leaned back, and for what felt like forever, the room was silent. You could hear a pin drop, it was that quiet. Finally, he broke the silence. Mr. Patterson, your clients are in serious trouble. And Representative Crockett, you've just reminded me why I took this job as a magistrate. He turned to face the camera, wearing an unusually serious look. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes you think you know someone, but then they turn the tables on you. I thought I was dealing with a politician looking for a spotlight. Instead, I'm up against a lawyer who played me in my own court. The audience erupted in applause, but Mathis raised a hand to quiet them down. But more importantly, he went on, she showed me that the law isn't about putting on a tough show for the cameras. It's about standing up for those who need it most. He looked directly at Crockett. Representative, you've come out on top. Your clients have won. And in the end, we all benefit when lawyers like you hold companies accountable. Mathis' decision really shifted things, not just for the 67 families in Dallas who finally got justice, but also for how people viewed him and Representative Crockett. He didn't stop at just ruling in favor of the displaced residents, he took it a step further by ordering the company to pay $2 million in damages, give housing vouchers to all the affected families, and cover legal fees. In a remarkable move, he even said, I'm referring this case to the FBI for possible federal fraud charges. Taking federal money meant for struggling communities isn't just a civil issue, it's a crime. The defense lawyer looked shocked, thinking they were headed towards a simple settlement, but now they had to worry about criminal charges. Instead of celebrating, Crockett used her time in front of the cameras to share a bigger message. This isn't just about my win or Magistrate Matthysse loss, she stated. It's really about what can happen when principled people work together instead of fighting against each other. Magistrate Matthysse didn't change his decision just because I made my case. He acted based on the clear evidence presented with integrity. She turned to him directly. Your Honor, you reminded me of why I became a lawyer, not for political gain, but to stand up for those who truly need it. After the show, Mathis did something you don't see often. He actually admitted he learned something. He told the cameras, I've been doing this for 25 years. I thought I'd seen it all, every lawyer, every case, and every person. But Representative Crockett showed me that you can be tough without being cynical and political without being fake. He took a moment, flashing a genuine smile. She's made me a better magistrate. Just a few hours later, #Crockett vs. Mathis started trending all over the country, bringing people together instead of causing division. Even conservative viewers, who usually have their doubts about Democrats, were impressed with Crockett's legal skills. One tweeted, I don't agree with her politics, but she really knows her stuff. On the flip side, liberals, who sometimes criticize Mathis' more traditional approach, appreciated how open he was to the evidence. Another post read, this is what happens when facts beat opinions. The episode left news networks scratching their heads. Was it about politics, entertainment, or legal issues? CNN pointed out Crockett's legal background and her growing presence in Congress. Fox News highlighted how both of them disagreed respectfully. Meanwhile, MSNBC zoomed in on issues around housing justice. In Dallas, 67 families were able to reclaim their dignity. Mrs. Sarah Johnson, the grandmother Crockett had mentioned, told local news, I never thought anyone important would actually listen to us, but that congresswoman made them hear our voices. The FBI probe that Mathis asked for led to charges against 3 executives and revealed similar fraud schemes in 12 different cities. It was surprising to see Crockett getting such bipartisan praise in Washington. One Democrat mentioned, Jasmine showed progressives can earn respect across the aisle. Even some Republicans were on board, saying, I might not agree with her policies, but her results are impressive. Mathis' show shifted focus, diving into legal aspects and the issue of housing justice. He told producers, that congresswoman reminded me that real people rely on this tribunal. This episode sparked a nationwide discussion about housing fraud and eventually led to the creation of the National Housing Justice Coalition, co-chaired by Mathis and Crockett. Maria Rodriguez, the coalition's coordinator, noted, what started in Dallas became a blueprint for tackling housing fraud across the country. They managed to recover $50 million for families who had been displaced and also encouraged some federal legislation. The so-called Mathis-Crockett model highlighted that people prefer real substance over flashy displays. Reflecting on the case later, Mathis said it was the most memorable of his career, not because of the drama, but because it reinforced the idea that the law should serve justice, not just entertain. Crockett viewed it as a template for action. Back up your beliefs with solid evidence. Their story turned into a shining example of how to disagree constructively, proving that when principled individuals come together, justice can win out. In a nation that's often split, Their teamwork gave us hope that our differences can actually make us stronger instead of pulling us apart. If this story about justice triumphing over politics struck a chord with you, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'd love to hear your thoughts too. What do you think about Crockett's approach? Did Mathis respond the way he should have? The tribunal was just the setting, but the real impact hit home for everyone who witnessed justice becoming a reality.